Scott Horton Comedy. That's right, I'm doing an event with Robbie the Fire Bernstein here in Austin on the 5th of November as part of Robbie's Porch Tour. It's kind of an audition, actually. I'm trying to get the job to replace Dave Smith as Robb's sidekick. So show up and pretend to laugh at my awesome, hilarious comedy jokes. Robbie and another dude are also doing stand-up. Then Robbie and I are going to do a live podcast about libertarian themes and Star Wars and things. That's November the 5th. Go to thefiretix.com to find out all about it. All right, y'all, welcome to the Scott Horton Show. I'm the director of the Libertarian Institute, editorial director of antiwar.com, author of the book Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, and the brand new Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism. And I've recorded more than 5,500 interviews since 2003, almost all on foreign policy, and all available for you at scotthorton.org. You can sign up for the podcast feed there, and the full interview archive is also available at youtube.com/Scott Horton Show. All right, you guys, on the line, I've got John Robb, and he writes on Substack at Global Guerrillas. He's a former Special Operations Commander, and I think I read Delta and SEAL?
It was a tier 1 unit. Worked with Delta and SEAL Team 6.
Oh, I got you.
A bunch of other guys
combined together, yeah. Okay,
yeah,
so the book is Brave New War from 2007, The Next Stage of Terrorism and the End of Globalization. And I've read about half of that, John. Really good stuff, and I have a lot of questions for you about all that, but we should not bury the lead, and the lead is that Twitter has been taken over by Elon Musk. Finally, yesterday, the deal was done. The CEO, et cetera, were frog marched right out of the building. And so what does that mean?
Yeah, it's going to be tough for Elon to do anything to fix the situation.
What's the situation?
The acquisition started back in April when it became apparent that Twitter was having a outsized impact on our potential survivability as a species, as a civilization. And what I mean by that is that, Twitter was the epicenter of a rapid escalation of the war in Ukraine. And, I've been tracking network movements for a long, long time and, understand how they operate. Saw it, move from insurgency back in Iraq all the way up to politics in the U.S. and protest movements, how the network actually mobilized people to act, and then how these movements proceeded forward to do damage or take control. And what we saw with Ukraine is that we had a regional conflict between that was between two nuclear superpowers. Typically that would be kept at a regional level in order not to escalate it. There would be selective sanctions, and there would be a dance in terms of the amount of aid that was given to Ukraine, and the kind of pressure that was being put on Russia to kind of damage them, bleed them a little bit, bleed the nuclear bear a bit, and the ultimate goal would be to kind of soften Russia and make it less likely to run offensive operations in the future. Standard superpower competition kind of thing. It's something that we developed over the last 70 years. It's a dance that you have to do in order to prevent escalation to nuclear war, and that didn't happen. What happened is that it ignited a network firestorm, and what I call a swarm developed that in a couple weeks' time reframed the war from this regional war with a nuclear superpower competition component into a global war against evil, anti-democratic forces. Hitler revived. World War II analogy started coming out. It was now an existential conflict. And then we added in the ability of the network to mobilize against Russia, who is now the new target. And what it did is it disconnected Russia in about 2 weeks. So the selective, very careful sanctions that were being put in place by the government were, tiny compared to all the companies and all the disconnection that went on. I mean, companies pulling out, stopping any kind of connection at the API level in the software space or in the financial flow space. Russians being kicked off of forums. It was pretty torrential, and everything except for the gas deliveries to Northern Europe was disconnected, and just recently now that's gone. But that escalation brought us right up to the edge of nuclear war. It was like unprecedented. And most of the standard conventional analysts, the academics that typically look at this space, totally don't account for that network component. They are totally oblivious to it. They can't modify their models. They don't understand the kind of situation we're in. And if you look at it with that kind of modification, and you look at, say, Kahn's escalation ladder, which had 40 some odd steps on an escalation to nuclear war, we're at level 20, just one before first nuclear use, and that's where we're at. We've been kind of running the ragged edge of just at the edge of nuclear war, and only thing that we're getting out of the government now and out of this network is this constant pedal to the metal, keep on escalating, Slavo-Ukraine, like, let's keep on going, it's damage the bear forever, existentially damage it, force them to submit kind of thing, which is just a one-way trip to a nuclear confrontation. Elon had to see it. I mean, the guy's all about trying to save the world or accelerate it, or thinking big picture. That's why he started the bid in April. I mean, he's getting distracted on a bunch of other stuff, but associated with Twitter. But I think fundamentally, if he can solve that, stop that pedal to the metal escalation system, brought on by the network, may save us all.
Well, he's a great example, right? He floated some peace terms, and Twitter let him have it. He's ratioed to oblivion just a couple of weeks ago. But now let me ask you, all this stuff about, well, it's a moral crusade and everybody's Hitler and whatever. This is the same thing that they've done to Manuel Noriega and David Koresh and Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi and Bashar al-Assad ad infinitum this whole time, my whole life. So what's different now?
Much of that and those run-ups were done by a very small group of people. It was part of a marketing kind of propaganda campaign in order to get this thing going. So they could turn it off, they could modify it. The classic kind of thing would be like the Kuwaiti nurse that would show up at the UN and talk about, or testify. I guess she was testifying in front of the Congress about how the Iraqi soldiers were disconnecting the incubators and throwing out the babies so they could ship the incubators back to Iraq. Well, we found out that was a lie, and that was promoted, and that was like all part of this manipulation campaign, to get us into this war, and a manipulation campaign that was like aided and abetted by the media. But this is different. This has an open source component. It's a network. It's a huge group of people, millions of people acting in concert. There's no one that can shut it off. There's no one that can modify it. It's not run by any one person, and it sends its fingers and tendrils into organizations at the mid to CEO level, and inside bureaucracies where people are taking action on their own to kind of move the war forward, move it towards.
And those of us in opposition,
escalation.
We're not a swarm of our own. We're not a network that is counteracting what you're talking about in any meaningful way. They're a swarm, but we're just kind of stuck here, overwhelmed by them.
Well, I think we're. I see politics as a different thing now. It's not right or left. It's more this coercive swarm versus dissent. And sometimes, the swarm is great because it can mobilize resources fast to get things done, get people pointed in the same direction. But it's also very, very dangerous if it outlives its usefulness or points in the wrong direction. And there's this dissent doesn't come from any one location. It comes from a lot of different locations. It's like I live in the New England area, and right next to where I live is where the Acton militia formed to march on Northbridge, right? And then there's little mile markers on the British retreat from the Northbridge, and it's like the Bloody Angle, and where they were sniped all the way back. That's kind of more like dissent. It's like people are taking pot shots at this cohesion, this swarm, and slowly disintegrating their arguments. But it's not coming from any single cohesive system. That's why it's very important to kind of keep the system open enough for dissent to form, and over time, it wears it down. It's not like you and I can, take shots at this thing, but we're not necessarily going to come at it from the same direction.
Yeah.
And that's a strength too, but it's also a weakness.
But the war party, on the other hand, they're disciplined because all they have to do is say, he's Hitler and you want to appease Hitler, and everybody knows that it's always 38 and you never do that. And
right.
So, and then that's it. And they just say that every day and call it a genocide. And I remember, in fact, I got in an argument. I'll go ahead and bring it up. I respect this woman for various reasons. Lindsay Beyerstein. She's one of the creators of The Daily Show back when, I think. And we got in an argument on Twitter, a polite one, at the time of I guess when the Russians withdrew from Bucha. And then the media came in and the Ukrainians came in and found the dead bodies and built up this narrative that this is a genocide, that they were going in there, the Russians, and killing every civilian in order to exterminate Ukraine as a civilization and all these things. And this was right when the Turks were hosting the talks. And this was right when we needed a realistic narrative about, yes, the war is ugly, but it's this, not that. And instead we got all this hysteria about genocide in essentially the perfect time to undermine negotiations and make it seem like, again, we're dealing with Adolf Hitler and you don't negotiate with Hitler, you destroy him. It's the only way to go.
It's open source. It's like anyone can come up. There's no barriers to entry, open source. Everybody can participate. So they come up with an innovation like that, they can put it into practice. And then, open source wars are held together by, what I call a plausible promise, a really simple goal that everyone can agree on, regardless of the direction that you or your motivations for joining it. In this case, it was like defeat Russia, defeat Putin, and as long as it's moving towards that goal, people will, repeat and amplify, any effort that moves it towards that goal. So it's a very strong form of warfare, particularly now that it can leverage the online component, and it's very difficult to beat. It can be beat, but it's hard to do so.
Mm. Well, so back to the top of the hour news here with Elon Musk now taking over Twitter. You're not going to get kicked off of Twitter for being good on Ukraine anymore. So that's something. It used to be that, and I don't know exactly how much it's going to change, but it has been just absolutely not just by, peer pressure and groupthink and intimidation and trendiness and whatever, but it's the algorithm that's been waging war against dissenters on there. People getting kicked right off or being shadow banned or, I saw a thing, Pedro Gonzalez had a tweet this morning about showing a couple of, one particular Ukrainian journalist who got 2 million followers with the snap of his fingers, and while everyone else on the other side is getting their point of view completely crushed. So with that now presumably set to change, that may change everything then, according to your theory of the swarm and the groupthink and the power of these tools, no?
Oh, yeah, no, definitely the swarm and what we've seen in politics over the last 4 or 5 years is greatly aided and embedded by, corporate partners. And the corporations are more than willing, the big networks are more than willing to sign on to support this group because it gives them a legitimacy that allows them to continue making money any way they want to make and without any kind of political pushback or regulation. And the algorithm is definitely a key here, is that if he can make the biggest changes to how things operate on Twitter by just changing the algorithms that are used. And it's far more important and less of a lightning rod than, say, bringing back people. Like unbanning people would cause all sorts of chaos, or focusing on lifting a lot of the speech bans or word bans. If he could just leave that alone and change the underlying dynamic, which would allow people that are already on the network who are voicing dissent to get growth and get the kind of footprint that they need to actually take down this war. Mm-hmm. That would be a lot more important with a lot less pushback. Ultimately, I mean,
I see what you mean. People have been so unfairly persecuted on there, though.
Oh yeah,
it's such an important place to have a voice, and then you get banned for no reason. There are people who got banned for saying that if you get the inoculation, then you can still spread COVID to somebody else, and they got permanently banned. And it's their biggest soapbox. It's their AM radio show, the closest they got to being able to have their say. And then if they get a new email address and a new handle, then they get banned for ban evading. And It's just, it really does suck. And I've been really lucky. I've been sort of shadow banned, I guess, but not persecuted that badly. I've been kicked off for a couple of days at a time or a week at a time before, I guess. But
yeah, no, I mean, it's all a question of tactics, right? So do you immediately start the massive controversy and pushback and fight and the regulation and the kind of criminal investigations that the government will launch and everything else by rolling back the bans right away?
I see what you mean.
Right? Or do you change the algorithms, change the dynamic on the network, let the people voicing dissent to get some popularity and slow down the algorithmic driven growth of the people that are driving this war forward. And so we can get some kind of sanity and save the world in the meantime, because none of this matters if we escalate to nukes and then that runs out of control.
All right, so talk about that, because, look, as you well know, you say nukes, it just sounds alarmist and silly.
Right.
And everybody knows it. No matter what, nobody's going to drop H-bombs. I had my friend Peter Van Buren on the show. I was like, come on. This is one error that nobody's made since way back when nobody could do anything about it under Harry Truman, and, on the other side. But, so the point is, I think it doesn't seem to me that we're likely to have a nuclear war. And yet at the same time, obviously the chance of it has been raised by some giant percentage, and the damage potential is so vast that we might as well be alarmist about it, like it could break out tomorrow, because we're talking about, a World War II worth of dead in the first day. And that's just the first day of a thermonuclear war. So, but I guess, well, let me just say how I look at it real quick so that you can say something better based off of that, maybe. I'm looking at it like the Russians don't need nukes to win this war. If they have to conscript their whole male population and just stand on street corners and occupy all that territory, eventually, probably I think that they could do that. So they're not going to need to use nukes in the war there. But on the other hand, NATO has all this money and all this tech and is willing to continue to pour it in there and willing to continue to ratchet up too. And they swear that they're going to help Ukraine win this war outright, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes. And sometimes they seem to be pretty certain that they're saying they're going to help them take back the Crimean Peninsula too. And so this is a unstoppable force versus an immovable object. And so I don't know in detail the syllogism about how it escalates to nuclear war, but I just know that, geez, you can't really have that level of tension and with a total refusal to negotiate on the American side, at least, without it at some point leading to H-bombs, because I mean, what the hell? I don't know. But so, I don't know. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. So tell me why you think this is a real danger then. Because you brought it up a couple times already here.
Yeah, no, I mean, the reason we avoided war for all that time is that we had a dance, and between the way we kind of negotiated conflict in the past, and recognizing that the opponent has red lines, that particularly when it's close to their territory and affects their security, and that they will not accept a humiliating defeat. And the way you get around that, if you want to like battle them out, is let like Russia invade Afghanistan, and you just lightly throw in just enough to, spoil their ability to actually conclude the war, and they chew themselves up. And if they go through a governmental change like they did at the fall of the USSR, you stand as far away as possible and let them do it to themselves. But in this instance, we don't consider their threats or their interests as anything important, and particularly the way the network frames it as an existential moral conflict, which means that there's no consideration of any interest on the Russian side.
Yeah, as Daryl Cooper says, they talk about Putin like he's Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the
Right.
bin Ladenite leader of the caliphate, who has no legitimacy whatsoever, even as a man, much less the leader of anybody else.
Right. And that you're going to force them into humiliation and defeat, and that's not going to happen. And from Putin's perspective, once you start looking at it as a two-sided conflict, like standard Boydian kind of thing, it's a contest of minds, is that Putin is much more concerned about losing internally, and he'll get less pushback for actually escalating this to nuclear weapons than losing inside Russia. That he's at risk personally if he actually ends up being humiliated, or Russia is defeated in this way. So
is it possible to have a limited nuclear war with Russia somewhere other than here, and Austin, Texas goes up in flames too?
Now there is a potential, but initially I was thinking that they would escalate if Ukraine pushed. The way I modeled it right off the bat was that as Ukraine pushed into Crimea, that became the red line, and that they would use tactical nuclear weapons. And given all the kind of threats that they've gotten in terms of conventional attacks against Russian targets, if they did that, potentially even nuclear attacks against Russian targets, is that they can't go to the tactical level. They would have to escalate it farther, and they would also need to set up a kind of a totem, a kind of warning to the West that they would not permit any intervention or destabilization of Russia in the future. And the only way to do that is go straight to countervaluing and take out a couple cities. And that would mean that any escalation beyond that goes straight to MAD. Trading cities between Russia and Europe, trading cities between U.S. and Europe. And I don't think the West is that far gone that they would actually engage in that. So that would be a limited nuclear war. Ukraine would lose 2, 3, 4, 5 cities. The world will go to hell in terms of the anger, and everyone would say, look, we were right. Putin is the most evil thing, even though the escalation made that possible.
You're telling me, really, John, you're saying that Twitter is making this inevitable, that there's no way that Biden and his government can have anything like a reasonable take, never mind that this is all their damn fault in the first place, dating back to 2014 and beyond, but just because Twitter won't have it, like the lady from Who's the Boss will get very upset, and then he'll have to take it back, just like the liberals who wrote this letter had to retract the letter a couple days ago here. That's what you're telling me, right? Is that this is inevitable because of the network effects of a bunch of NPCs retweeting each other on Twitter.
Yeah, but those NPCs are the ones. I mean, that's where news is. Twitter and the network in general sits upstream of news right now. It sits upstream of policy, sits upstream of politics. It's where everything is done. It's vetted. It's like that's where it's produced. That's the sausage factory for all of this stuff. And there is a group of people that are largely in control of that. And it's their good opinion and their views on this that Biden is trying to win, and people inside the administration are trying to get on their side. Anyone in the academic establishment, anyone in the policy establishment that spoke out against this war, even if they didn't do it on the network, they were found out, and it was broadcast on their network that they're the enemy, and they went to try to get them fired, discredited, pushed to the corners. There's not anyone in the administration that really wants to take that kind of heat, both here and in Europe. And then they also want to lead it. They see that as their people. It's like this is like their constituency to a large extent. And leading an open source movement like this requires that it's a contingent leadership. It's not like appointed or you're not there because of your position. It only is given to you if you move the ball towards its goal. And its goal is to defeat Putin. I mean, the very start of this network, and the reason it started so fast, right? I mean, it went right out of the chocks and it was gone. It was zooming. Is that a lot of the vanguard, and in revolutionary movements, there's always like a vanguard that kicks it off, small group of people that set the right conditions for the revolution to ignite, the insurgency to ignite. And it came out of the political environment that initially was against Trump, and Trump was connected to Putin, and then it was against fascism, Trump and Putin. After January 6th and the hearings and stuff started redefining it as a war against fascism abroad and at home. And these folks were in this whole war frame from the get-go. And when Putin did this, gave the green light, and he made the error of trying to go for the entire country rather than just regaining or taking the Donbass and the like, is that he proved them right. They're saying, we said he was evil. We said he was the ultimate evil. We said he was Hitler. We said he was, the one who, inflicted Trump on us. He rigged our elections. He intervened with us. The whole intelligence community, a lot of people in the intelligence community and national security communities that, been talking about this, angry at Russia for years. And they all jumped on board, and then it was off to the races. And but Twitter is not just some kind of like little chat space or whatever. And it is upstream of all these other systems now. And that's why it's so important to control. That's why Elon's buying it. I mean, that poor guy, man. I mean, I don't think anyone's really truly appreciated what he's done. I mean, he's the most important person in the world today, by far. It's not even anyone even in the same ballpark. The guy, I mean, he accelerated electric cars, and I think that's a big deal, by 15, 20 years. We might not even have an electric car industry. We'd still be smatterings of it, right? He totally changed that dynamic. He introduced like autonomous driving, which is, used by millions. I mean, people were using it to drive to work and back, and it's only caused, 5, 6 accidents, fatal accidents since it was introduced. Yet they're still attacking him for it. That's, if you have older people in your household or disabled people or whatever, that's like a godsend. It gives you all your time back. And there's still kinks, but it's still stuff that people rely on like 24/7. And then in space, the whole thing was run by a cartel of big defense companies that had totally flubbed the whole thing and kept the cost per kilo in the tens of thousands. And it was just nuts expensive, making all other space development impossible. And the guy broke into that industry, destroyed it, and now is launching a satellite or having a launch a week almost. Satellites are going up in droves. I mean, it's down to, $1,400, $1,200 a pound and dropping. And all of a sudden we have a vibrant space sector and a zooming. I mean, he opened up space, and then on top of it, he built a satellite internet almost overnight, accessible anywhere in the world. I mean, for $100 a month or less, and that will only get cheaper. I mean, basically connecting the world with it. So he's done all of those things, and there's a lot more that he's going to come and do. But now he has to come back and try to save this system from killing us. And I wish I could do more. I wish I was more of a contributor in this, but I wasn't. I didn't have the same continuity of events in my past to kind of pull that off. But wow, what a weird place we're in right now. It's like, a nuclear war, or intense navel gazing, where everyone's like, fix more problems internally, fix ourselves first. Everyone has to think the same way in order to progress. Is going to just chew us up and drive. And while we're drawing down energy resources and drawing down, trying to slow the pace of the economy and switch everyone over to virtual instead of real consumption, and that's just a collapse formula from hell. That's while restricting speech all the way down. It's a absolute disaster.
Man, John, so let me ask you this. Presuming that we live, can you give some advice to the anti-war movement? I mean, let me start you with one example here. We do have a program now, and it has not gone quite as viral as I would have hoped, but we have had some success in this push to get people to call Congress to support the war powers resolutions on Yemen. And we got them passed before, but Trump vetoed it. But it'd be much harder for Biden to veto it, I think. And I'm not sure how much you know about that war. I presume everything. And so this would be a hell of a lot. It would make it illegal for the support for the Saudis and the UAE and AQAP to continue there. And so there's like 113 co-sponsors. We have let me if I can figure out how to articulate it. We're right at the cusp of making this thing important and viral. We got some momentum. Like, man, we need a kick in the ass to figure out how to get everybody to be excited about this thing when, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, you're saying that Twitter's upstream of everything. It seems to me like TV is still the boss.
Okay,
and
now
if
you
TV said if it was all about Yemen this week, then we'd really get somewhere. But we don't have a single hero on TV that champions this. Kennedy lets me talk about it every couple of weeks on Fox Business Channel, but there's no host that really is into it. And so, I feel like, man, we could do it if only we could solve one little puzzle here. And then, of course, the next part is we got to do the same thing about Ukraine. And like starting right now, we have to do something.
All the stuff you see on TV, it's done on Twitter first, and it's down, TV's downstream. It just picks up the messages and amplifies them. I mean, it's truly, this is where you're going to fight. Your luck is that with the trying to stop the Saudis from chewing up people in Yemen, is that Saudi Arabia, with this price hike coming, or production reduction, has pissed off the swarm, right? So the swarm is like, you are either with us or against us, and they're going around everywhere around the world asking that. Will you isolate Russia? And China fell afoul of that. Now they're getting hammered. Saudi Arabia fell afoul of that, and now they're getting hammered. They think they're okay because most of their biggest customer is China now. But that has really soured outlook or viewpoints on Saudi Arabia. It's gone very, very negative just recently, just in the last 5-6 months. They're seen as an enemy, increasingly as an enemy of the United States. And once they go through those production cuts, Biden's already on board to kind of review all of the relationships they have with Saudi. So your interests are actually aligning with the swarm right now, right? So you could ride that. Is that Saudi Arabia now, or in the not too distant future, is going to be seen as an enemy of the United States?
Hey man, you guys should all sign up for the Libertarian Institute's email list. Will Porter's been putting together this great newsletter every week. And all you got to do is go to the bottom of the page at libertarianinstitute.org and sign up there. It's real dang good. Hey y'all, the audiobook of my book Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism is finally done. Yes, of course, read by me. It's available at Audible, Amazon, Apple Books, and soon on Google Play and whatever other options there are out there. It's my history of America's war on terrorism from 1979 through today. Give it a listen and see if you agree. It's time to just come home. Enough already. Time to end the war on terrorism. The audiobook. Hey guys, I've had a lot of great webmasters over the years, but the team at expanddesigns.com have by far been the most competent and reliable. Harley Abbott and his team have made great sites for the show and the Institute, and they keep them running well, suggesting and making improvements all along. Make a deal with expanddesigns.com for your new business or news site. They will take care of you. Use the promo code SCOTT and save $500. That's expanddesigns.com. Man, I wish I was in school so I could drop out and sign up for Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom instead. Tom has done such a great job on putting together a classical curriculum for everyone from junior high schoolers on up through the postgraduate level. And it's all very reasonably priced. Just make sure you click through from the link in the right margin at scotthorton.org. Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom. Real history, real economics, real education. So that's how we played I interviewed Anel Sheline, and this is her narrative, and this is how we titled it, was, oh, you're mad at Saudi Arabia? Let's end the war in Yemen. And in fact, it sucks though, John, because what you do is you got this narrative comes out of Congress, these damn Democrats are, oh, well, we should just entirely break off our relationship with Saudi Arabia and get every last soldier out of there, which is, of course, my dream come true. But that also means that they don't really mean that, right? And so instead we get nothing when we have a very reasonable ask on the table, which is let's stop this genocide.
Yeah, no, it's only going to become possible because of this increasing war with Russia and anyone who disagrees with us.
But I just mean we need to focus it from, well, we're just all mad at Saudi now, aren't we, to we really got to get these war powers resolutions passed. Like, that's what I don't know if you know the answer, but that's what I'm trying to get from you. Is like, how do you get the swarm to pay attention to the right? Like, we have them on the right subject, but on the wrong topic. You know what I mean? We just got to get them focused on these war powers resolutions for 8 weeks, for Christ's sake, and we win.
Yeah, no, you'll get some traction on isolating Saudi, but for the wrong reason. I mean, I just wrote a report earlier this week. It focused on one of the elements, one of the things actually driving this forward. It's called Gleichschaltung. Are you familiar with it?
No, I mean, I read your article, but I didn't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, it's kind of like the secret sauce of fascism. Now everyone's using the word fascist now, and it's mostly like authoritarian, strongman kind of thing, jackboots kind of stuff. That's kind of the superficial definition. It's more of an epithet against anyone they disagree with. And so the reality, the thing that really made fascist system so strong, and one of the big three contenders in the 20th century for dominant system, the system that could wage total war the best, both in peacetime and during wartime, was that they had this secret sauce called the Gleichschaltung. It's a way to it's the first three laws that Hitler passed, and once he took power and invoked a state of emergency, and it's also the reason what he later attributed to their success as a party is that it's really about getting a capitalist economy, a messy capitalist, well, all these little bureaucracies and organizations and different groups and individuals all pointed in the same direction. How do you can't run them all, under one bureaucracy. That would be a communist or socialist, and that just crushes innovation and long-term, any kind of flexibility that you would have. You keep a lot of that if you keep this decentralized structure, but you have the benefits of being a command economy if you get everyone focused in the right direction. And the way they did that is this concept called Gleichschaltung. And it's about everybody buying into what they had as Nazi ideology, but that really just boiled down to everyone has the same enemy. and they found they got the most punch out of that. That's the thing that, when the propaganda ministry gave out a narrative about why this group or why this nation is an enemy, that narrative would then be picked up by the compliant media, and then everybody would use that as their goal. And they would work together in order to achieve it, even if they had different motivations, in terms of making money and things. So they wouldn't like outcompete each other in ways that would be deleterious to achieving that goal. So, problem with that thing is that approach is that in order to remain effective, that fear of that, of internal enemy, that anger, that focus, is that you have to increase the intensity of it over time. You have to make that enemy worse, and you have to, make people increasingly mad at it. And the end result is that and the fatal flaw of fascism as a system was that you end up being aggressive to everybody. And you end up with the Holocaust, where the internal enemies are so terrible, you have to go with a final solution to wipe them out. And you kill 6 million Jews and 6 million other people, communists and dissenters, and anyone that disagrees is wiped out. And you declare war on almost every other nation, because they're all enemies and they're all less than, they're all, tribal existential threats. That kind of hyper aggression in order to maintain alignment of a complex society is ultimately fatal. So, what we're seeing here is a networked version of that. It's kind of a revival of that, is that everyone has to think the same in order to go forward. And we're doing that through these common enemies. And you could already see it proliferating. First, it starts with, domestic enemies, MAGA, Trump. Then, we see it now expanded to Putin, and then now it's like China and Saudi Arabia and, North Korea and Iran and others. All these nations are going to be put into this threat camp.
Yeah.
And it's already proliferating. And we're going to end up being at war with almost everyone except for a handful of countries in Europe.
Yeah, but okay, so I'm a little confused because I understand what you're saying, that no one's driving, but somebody kind of is, because, obviously what you're talking about is it's all the interests of the U.S. national security state that are being reflected here, and the swarm doesn't ever disagree with them. This is the FBI and the CIA run Twitter, run those algorithms. A bunch of former employees of these agencies infest Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and all the rest of them.
Yeah, they're not that smart. This is open source. They are in a lot of people, a lot of organizations, and a lot of corporations and others, the military-industrial complex, and it's real. But more reflects the old way of U.S. alignment, was to make war profitable, and that's Roosevelt's kind of innovation. Rather than forcing everyone to, into this propagandistic kind of framework, he just made it worth money, right? And people participated willingly.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it doesn't have to be conspiracy with this framework. Is that there's so many players, and they all have motivations, and some are more powerful than others. Some are big pieces, some are small pieces in the septic tank. Is that they all are focused on the same goal, and
yeah, but
it's that,
how come the goal is always what Bill Kristol wants? That's just a coincidence that the dumbest people with the wrongest narrative about everything get to dominate every time?
I wouldn't credit him with starting this. But,
no, I just mean it's just coincidentally the swarm always agrees with him. He always agrees with them. But you look at his point of view. It's not like he's bending on anything.
Maybe he was
not very
just
much. Anyway.
In tune with network fascism from the get-go.
Well, now he's for gay rights, because that's what his audience wants to hear more. He's moved back toward the left. But as far as his foreign policy or whatever, it just seems like that's the consent. And I'm just using Kristol as shorthand for, the very worst centrist, moderate types, supposed moderates, the McCains and the Bidens and the Bushes and the Clintons of the last 30 years who've ruined everything that everyone hates, who are the reason that Trump was able to win against them in the first place. Somehow they are still completely dominant when it comes to the narrative. The neocons.
Well, I think Kristol's kind of he's just weather vaning to whatever the dominant Gleichschaltung is demanding, right? You're just early at picking up the wind that was moving in that direction. There's no independent thought on his part. The fact that he's like picking up all the left-wing value system that is being pushed out as, you have to adopt this as to be part of the society. That's Gleichschaltung. He picked it up early, and I think the way out is that you have to, and hopefully Elon's able to do this, is affect those algorithms, allow the dissent to accumulate, and that dissent will pick away at this swarm, at the system, because if it wins, we're in this perpetual war, and all dissent is muted, and we're in this like orthodoxy, this narrow, sterile, stagnant orthodoxy of thought, where no thought can be put out there unless it's like pre-approved and vetted by the network. And I call that the long night. It's 1984, but worse. Because we could build systems now, once it gets into the infrastructure, that moderate and control the conversations of billions of people simultaneously. I mean, that's like the totalitarians', wet dream. It's like they hope they could never build a system like this. It would take, millions of people in a bureaucracy going over all these conversations. And now we have a way of automating it through AI and the like that allows you to do it in real time at the scale of billions of people. And then you're going to add in the augmented reality and everything else. It's like moderating your perceptual stream, what you're allowed to see, and how you see it, and how people see you, all controlled by this network through corporations implementing these systems that ultimately want to narrow your thinking.
Yeah. And that's the only way to have your say
their
is
approaches,
to use their medium to have your say, but then you're controlled. Your message is their medium.
Yeah, there's no gulags except for being in the medium. But the thing is, you have to, in order to succeed or like to work or do anything, you can even see it right now in the online spaces. I mean, what we have already is that unless you're connected, you're basically dysfunctional. You can't even, even dating or looking for a job or everything requires an online component here. Yeah. So to put a person in the penalty box to punish them, disconnection is equivalent to a gulag. It's an open air prison.
Yeah. It's all Neil Postman predicted all of this
except actually
stuff.
Being connected. Yeah, well, being connected actually is really truly the re-education system. So you're motivated to go back to the re-education system because you can't function in the society unless you are. Yeah. And a lot of people say, oh, well, I can do okay on my own. Well, go ahead. I mean, if you want to be poor.
Right. That's what I'm always telling my guys at the
right?
Institute. You young whippersnappers need to get on that TikTok there and get us some TikTok traffic, because you gotta, that's how it is. It's the surrender of culture to technology. That's what Neil Postman called it back 25 years ago. But hey, let me spend a little time asking you about the bin Ladenites, because my opinion is that ain't over yet. And I was reading your book. I got about 2/3 of the way through it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to finish it yet. Brave New War, which was written like right in 2007. And so there's lots of interesting things in there. We surely can't cover it all. But, since then, of course, Obama and America's allies helped build the Islamic State and then destroyed it again. And we've had, the war in Yemen where we switched sides, and we've been fighting on Al-Qaeda's side. We now call them the Giants Brigade, and they work directly for the United Arab Emirates on the ground there in Yemen for the last almost 8 years. And so it seems like the war against AQAP, at least, is going to continue indefinitely. And these are the same guys who have reached out and touched people in Europe, and they almost blew up a plane over Detroit on Christmas Day 2009. And of course, it's all Bush and Obama and Trump and Joe Biden's fault. And yet here we are. And it seems like nobody's even paying attention to these guys anymore. And yet all of their motives for attacking us, which you got right in your book. Congratulations. A lot of people don't get it right. And especially for 2007 is relatively early there. you hadn't heard Ron Paul beat down Giuliani yet, and you're still right about the motive and the strategy of Al-Qaeda's war against us. But so it seems like all those things remain. And I don't know about 9/11 sized attacks, but we have more or less called off the terror war. We still got troops occupying in in Iraq and Syria and all that. But our support for the dictators remains, our support for Israel remains, and our pressure on them to keep their oil prices artificially low for our benefit remains, and all of the reasons they attacked us in the first place. And so I wonder what you think about the next phase of that war, whether we're just waiting for another shoe to drop there, or whether, America would have to hire the Saudis to do it if they wanted that to happen.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any interest or they're on to bigger targets and bigger wars. And I mean,
what's left of Al-Qaeda is?
Yeah, they think Al-Qaeda and the whole jihadi thing is all over. I mean, they're at war with Russia and China and Saudi Arabia directly. This is, bigger fish and more danger to all of us. Hopefully we survive this. Is that,
well, what about all the guys in the Idlib
it was
province?
Really hard to. Yeah, it's hard to disengage, and I was in front of the House Armed Services Committee back in 2009, and they asked me what we should do about Afghanistan. I said, leave, and here's how. And it's like people are like, what? They were looking for a strategy to kind of continue it. I go, there's no winning here. Get out, right? But these guys were like totally distracted by it, and that whole distraction was, I wrote a report not too long ago on that Global Guerrillas report thing I do. Is that our big thing after the Cold War should have been trying to figure out ways to onboard Russia and China, right? If we're going to bring them into the global system, is that we should have been focusing on making sure that they onboard correctly or interact with us correctly, and they don't become threats. And we got distracted in the Middle East, and we got distracted by all these wars, thinking that oil was the biggest problem, ended up fracking made that all useless. Is that, and then we turned Russia into China into threats within, 20 years, a little over 20 years. Where, China wasn't even remotely a threat 20 years ago. And we screwed the pooch so badly that we're talking a colossal grand strategy error, unforced error. It's amazing in how stupid it was, and we're paying the price now. And by trying to correct it by declaring war on them. And trying to roll them back. It's just nuts.
Well, and so I get it about the swarm, and it's just the groupthink and the peer pressure and the moralism and all. And I guess you're saying even the military-industrial complex and all of those interests take a back seat to just the narrative building on all of that stuff. That's the most important aspect of all of it. Never mind even think tanks or anything else. It's just goofballs on Twitter.
All those guys in the think tanks, and I know a lot of them, and I see a lot of them. They're all just appealing to the swarm. They're all appealing for clicks. They're all being trained. Look, this isn't like it's Gleichschaltung. It's like there's a whole like Hitler Youth. You send kids into the program and they get indoctrinated. Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think you get when you get on Twitter and Facebook and stuff? It's like you're getting the likes, you're getting the follows, you're getting the strokes from people, agreeing with you and interacting with you. And then you get the punishment, the zing, from the unfollows, from the pushback, the trolls. It's a training program for a view of the future, a view of the world. Mm-hmm. And it's, those guys are just as susceptible to it as anyone else. You don't have those policy people, those academics, those people in think tanks. They're all competing to see who's the smartest on this platform, who can have an input.
Now, so
if you're not there, you're not relevant.
But now, so back to the Bin Ladenites for a minute. There are still a hell of a lot of
Yeah.
these guys. And, you know, in
Oh,
fact,
yeah.
as I read your book, I thought, you know, you couldn't see the future. You were trying very hard and making some really great predictions. But it turned out that the Bin Ladenites really, the best they ever did was Bush sort of accidentally gave them Western Iraq for a little while. But then it was the local Sunnis who kind of cleaned their clock and took care of that problem for us. But then Obama took their side in Libya and Syria and in Yemen. And that has been such a boon to them. And they built a gunning Islamic Caliphate, Bin Ladenite, Zarqawi's fantasy could have never happened. It used to be Glenn Beck's ridiculous war propaganda. Oh, there's a caliphate out there. It's coming for you. Well, Obama actually built them a damn caliphate. Now, I know that they blew it up again, but there's still a lot of refugees from that. And so I'm interested what you say about, well, they got bigger and better things to do, like maybe the CIA and the Saudis and the Turks will ship them off to fight the Chinese, is maybe what you're implying there. I mean, if they're going against America's allies, then that sounds like a joint condominium with the Saudis and the Turks. It's the way they backed the Chechens in the 90s and all that kind of thing, right? And the Uyghurs in the late 90s in Afghanistan.
Yeah, all the battle lines will be drawn about who sides with Russia and who doesn't, who takes a neutral stance and who doesn't. Neutrality to the network is the same thing as being as an enemy.
So the Bin Ladenites have
this
always
kind of
been
viewpoint-
good on Russia from America's point of view, right?
Right.
So we were allies with
Yeah,
Khattab
right.
in Chechnya 20 years ago.
To the extent they undermined Russia and China and Saudi Arabia, now that Saudi Arabia has decided to decide with the Chinese and the Russians, yeah, then we're anyone who could actually undermine those guys.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, Saudi intelligence is how we run our jihadis. So
Right.
we're gonna
I know,
have to build a
it's gonna-
direct link. I guess just use the Turks to run them even against the Saudis now.
Well, we'll see. We'll see where Saudi Arabia ends up. I mean, they're in play right now. So which sphere? And now that this is like, the
CIA preferred his cousin
tribal
bin
dynamic-
Nayef, right? And so they really don't want Mohammed bin Salman. They can't get along with him. Is that it?
Yep.
And then they can't do anything about that. Seems like the CIA could just do something about that.
As things heat up, we'll see what happens on that.
Interesting.
There's also a strong tribal dynamic in all of this. Is that the folks on the network, they see every enemy as an existential enemy. They don't see them as human either. Okay, so that can increase the intensity and increase the range of action that you're able to take against them. It's very tribal in its orientation. Remember Apocalypse Now?
Sure.
Okay, you know the whole basis of the movie, right? Kurtz was looking for a way to get his soldiers out of this Western mentality, meaning that everybody has a fundamental right or meaning for life and stuff. And when his soldiers had to do things that were too aggressive, like putting heads on pikes and stuff like that, it would wreck them. They would run into mental problems and have difficulties. Whereas the tribesmen that he was working with were able to go do all the horrific stuff associated with war and coercion and making, winning against an insurgency, winning as an insurgent, is that, and then they come home and they'd kiss their wives goodnight and your kids goodnight and be absolutely normal because they didn't see the enemy as even remotely human. And he wanted his soldiers to do that, but it was so hard, the horror thing. We're kind of doing that to ourselves to a certain extent with this networking. It's that the enemy isn't really human and Russians don't really exist at all.
And
bots,
it's Americans versus each other
NPCs.
too, right? I mean, Matt Taibbi
Right.
has this great book, Hate Inc., about how everybody's in their narrow little silo. I mean, God forbid, there are literally people who call them, not very many, but there are some who call themselves Hortonians because they just like my kind of style of libertarianism or something like that. It's a very narrow silo of people. And then that point of view is not represented in many other places. And then everyone in all the other
Right.
silos would look at me and my people as a bunch of kooks compared to all the things that they all agree about. And then we're not even talking to each other. In fact, that's all the thread this morning is how many people are quitting Twitter. They don't want to talk with the people who are now potentially to be unbanned. And they just want to go somewhere else instead and not share their swarm with our swarm.
Yeah, that won't work. It's the same departure from Twitter that occurred with Trump's disconnection. There's no other place. You go off, you go to those alternative, go to Mastodon. It sucks. Nobody listened there. Nobody you want to connect with is there. And you come back. Same thing with all the other alternative networks on the right. And, networks are weird. They have this kind of Metcalfe's law thingy going. Its value increases by the square of the number of nodes in it, right? And that the network this big, with all the people in all these different organizations all interconnected, is unreplicated right now. So it also that's one of the reasons Metcalfe's law is one of the reasons why we're seeing so much aggression too. Is that if what we're seeing is a network at war with the world, it's that it wants to expand, and the two most independent networks, or the kind of dark zones from our existing network, the one it can't really control is Russia, had its own social network, own kind of infrastructure, and China, which has set up its great firewall, and now it wants control of that. The big global one that we're part of wants to eat it, wants to expand into it, add those additional nodes, get those increases in value. Mm-hmm. And this is topologically, this is just expansion of that network. It's like it wants control. Mm-hmm. It wants dominance.
Let me ask you this, John. What about the importance of podcasts here? Because the most important podcaster in the West, at least, is Joe Rogan, who I wouldn't say is a hardcore radical dissenter or anything like that, but he's certainly a very open-minded guy and has radical dissenters on there who oftentimes make a big splash on there. And of course, I don't mean to sell him short either. He's taken his brave stance as well, especially on the COVID stuff and all of that. And they haven't quite been able to clamp down on podcasts, at least yet. What do you foresee there? Well, and even what is it? First of all, what does it mean that Rogan is the biggest big shot and that his numbers even make Tucker Carlson pale in comparison? Tucker Carlson has by far the biggest cable TV news show.
Well, online's bigger than off. And you can see that the network's numbers in regular TV are paltry compared to what you can do online. Mm-hmm. And Joe is lucky that also that that Spotify's there. You got to have a network that has some dominance that will protect you. And there's no surety that he would still be on YouTube if that was the only point of failure.
Right.
So
I was just going to say, if he'd just been on there, he'd have been kicked off by now.
Well, Spotify also said just recently that it wouldn't take Kanye off either. And, for better or worse, I mean, he definitely pushed a lot of people's hot buttons, but, they're kind of making a stance of trying to maintain its level of openness. They're taking, they lost some customers and they continue to lose customers as a result of that, but they were able to, and they don't make money through advertising. One of the keys here.
And think about how crazy that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just think about how nuts that is. Where this guy, Kanye West, I mean, I don't know a single song by him, but I know that he's been essentially a superstar for about 20 years, 25 years or something. He's an extremely famous and important guy. And I know that he's been crossing some lines and pushing some buttons, as you say there. But the idea that you could just unperson him off the internet like he's a Nazi or whatever, which I don't even think they ought to be able to do that to Nazis either. But, man, like, you can't just unperson someone as important as Kanye West, can you? Really?
Yeah, I mean, they disconnected the most powerful person on earth. I mean, they took off a sitting U.S. president.
I know it.
It disconnected him and his supporters. It wasn't just him. They disconnected all the networks.
Yeah.
And it took away the email providers, took away the payment systems, took away
Kanye
everything. It was
is
like
a person of color.
that's one of the reasons why you don't see as much of the vocal online portion of it. It's all a back end kind of disconnection.
Uh-huh.
So you don't see a lot of the vitriol you normally would have seen to kind of egg it on, but it is being done on the backside.
Right.
It's an interesting kind of connection between the traditional disconnection whisper network for anti-Semitism and then you have a network add-on and amplification, and brought on by the network. Yeah.
Hey guys, sorry, I don't mean to go all FDR on you or anything, but here's the new deal. All the interviews are now going up first at scotthortonshow.substack.com. Of course, they'll all be going up at scotthorton.org the next day, and the archives going back to 1999 will still be free for you there at scotthorton.org. But I got to generate revenue, you know. Hey, y'all, they've got great deals on weed at thehempspot.com. The Hemp Spot specializes in Delta-8 tetrahydrocannabinol instead of Delta-9, so they can send it straight to you anywhere in America. Recently, a friend moved and didn't have a guy in his new town, but then he heard about the hempspot.com on my show and was saved, figuratively and literally, because if you use the promo code Scott, you get 15% off every order and free shipping on any order over $100. Legal jams, bud, gummies, and the rest in your state. Thehempspot.com. Spell the THC. You guys, my friend Mike Swanson has written such a great revisionist take on the early history of the post-World War II national security state and military-industrial complex in the Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy years. It's called The War State. I have to say, it's the most convincing case I've read that Kennedy had truly decided to end the Cold War before he was killed. In any case, I know you'll love it. The War State by Mike Swanson. It's pretty insane the way, and the first precedent that I think, well, maybe they went after some Nazis first, but the first major precedent that they went after was Alex Jones. And apparently, just like you're saying there, it was unofficial. Like, you have to just use your imagination. I guess they had a lawn party on a Saturday afternoon, and they all had a conversation that agreed that Monday, when we all go back to work, we're going to kick this guy off of every single platform in Silicon Valley all at once. And that was amazing. And then once they used him as the, the kind of benchmark that, look, we can do that, then they've been at it ever since. Oh, what fun. We can just unperson whoever we want, no matter how important they are.
Yeah, that's the thing is that's that punishment mechanism. It's, with corporations willing supporters because they get the legitimacy necessary to, continue to wield the kind of power that they do. And still make a lot of money, and the inability of government to kind of keep stability. And they basically give a wink and a nod to corporations to do it for them, right? Mm-hmm. Keep things in line. These corporations work in tandem. It's like once one big guy goes, it's like a cascade of disconnection that occurs.
Right.
And no one has to be responsible for it, because I'm just playing a part. There's no coordination. It's just, they did it, I did it.
Right.
The next guy's doing it.
Yeah, all the responsibilities diffused.
And we're corporations. We can do anything we want, right?
Okay, but John, so
we're not beholden.
If you're a leader of the global guerrillas, I mean, you're, as far as how horrible all this swarm is and all of that, I mean, your whole concept here too is about all the many points of failure of all of these systems and how we could make their swarm fail. We could undermine, if we do it right, by using all these guerrilla type tactics, and information about how networks work to change the situation so that the lady from Who's the Boss doesn't get to decide for liberals anymore what stupid war they're supposed to support or whatever it is. No?
Right. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, one angle of attack would be like what Elon just did. He bought the epicenter, right? And, supporting him, even if it doesn't look like he's going in the right direction, regardless of what he's doing, there's a bigger battle underway that you probably won't see. That he's fighting to switch it from an advertising network to something else, because the advertisers will enforce this network kind of viewpoint on things. Indirectly by affecting his revenues. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's also the disconnection and a larger frame for this, the way of understanding this is that we're in the process of building what Marshall McLuhan, the really good insight into the long-term impacts of this stuff is that we're building a social artifact. A system, a technological system that kind of encompasses all of our social and economic system. It's going to be big, and it's going to be a way that we can, hopefully interoperate in a way that makes us all better off for interacting with it. But we're fighting over the assumptions and the kind of moral substrate and everything else that goes into how you build that thing. We're still in the early days of building it, and it's like a global war. Is it going to be restrictive, like the swarm wants it to be, or limiting all one thing of pre-approved stuff, or is it going to be open? And that war, like all online wars, and most wars right now have the center of gravity is mostly online, even if there's like physical warfare underway. The physical warfare really just punctuates the online competition, particularly when it gets to be kind of insurgency based. Is that we're gonna keep on. I'm trying to fight more on trying to put limits into the system early, kind of like blocking factors. So I went in front of the Senate. They were looking at Facebook and how to regulate the big social networks. And it was me in front of the Senate committee and this guy from Facebook. He was, man, that guy, he was absolutely ripped apart by the senators that day. And I'm in the back room with him and watching him. He's sweating bullets, man. This guy was, Ted Cruz, when he gets going, is like vicious. That guy is like, never want to have him as my prosecutor. I introduced this idea of a very simple thing. And I don't know how much you got it, but at least it got into the public discussion, is this idea of digital rights. Basic free speech rights that we're not being defaulting to whatever's in the terms of service at these different corporations, and the terms of service are more important than the Constitution, and they could be interpreted any which way they want by the corporation implementing them. So digital rights and digital data ownership, so we have a piece of the future, because all that data that we're producing is all being used to train AIs and are going to be worth trillions. And so we contributed to the creation of these things, and we're not getting any stake in their future. It's kind of just being stripped mined from us right now. And then openness, like openness, open access for businesses, to the store and things like that. Right now, the big guys charge 30%, and on every transaction goes through your phone. So it's basically they're taxing the whole of the smartphone economy, and they'll tax all the AR stuff as it comes online, and it will be 10 times larger. So we want and they control who gets actually into those stores, which will control our perception. So we want open stores, open access to businesses. Or you could grow your site, your like little business on organically on like a Facebook or social network without having to pay a Facebook tax, where they're suppressing you and making it harder for you to grow your site intentionally to force you to buy advertising. Mm-hmm. So as a small business, you're like being taxed, and it's not an open system to allow you growth. So things like that. And, if we can get like the blocking action, and I talked to the Texas AG, and they put into place at least a legal framework, the initial legal framework for, protecting people online, so you can't be disconnected based on your views if you're from Texas. And it stood up to appeal. And then, I talked to them again about expanding that to some ownership, like they would represent the data being produced by Texans on these networks and seek some potential ownership rights for them. So they would either get paid, which could be substantial over time, or they would control who gets access to it. Those kind of blocking actions make a big difference downstream. It's like the initial conditions on a complex system that's just booting up. If you can get those initial conditions in place, things turn out better, right? Long term. Those digital rights, you get them done now, you stop a lot of excess and disaster long term. Mm-hmm. because dissent can continue, right? But there's like things for digital rights, for instance, you have to have like identity, because I mean you can't just attach rights to a anonymous entity, right? And people get mad at that, but you know what? You can keep anonymity, but it's going to have more filters and restrictions and algorithmic suppression. You're going to have to deal with that. But if you want rights, you're going to have to identify yourself. And the anonymous accounts are also too easy to spoof using bots and AIs and things like that. So you're not going to want to assign rights to those things.
I need to read a lot more about that. Because, you know, I mean, honestly, I was so hesitant to even get into the internet in the first place back in high school in 1994. I was like, don't you see? It's all a NSA, CIA plot to get into your brain, to hook us all together, to show who all knows who, to track all of our financial transactions, to read everything we're writing to each other. That would have just been in a zine or whatever. That was none of their damn business who was reading it or not. Or used to be a time, I remember, you could go to 7-Eleven, get a Slurpee, go home, and it wasn't a part of your permanent record anywhere. You could go to the beach for the week and come back, and no one knew where you were, and it wasn't written down. Not that it's a secret, but it was just, it never mattered. It was never anybody else's business what you were doing until our very recent kind of history where now everything is on our permanent record. Everything.
Right. And, you know, things change. I mean, I was there, right. I was, you know, fresh out of the military, went to school, and then came back, and I was the first internet analyst, professional one, I guess, in the entire world back in 95. So every single internet company came through my doors back then. So I got to see how this thing was built from the get-go. And, you know, I was also one of the guys that back in 2001 created the early social networks. So we were a lot more optimistic and utopian back then. We had an open system based on what we called really simple syndication, RSS, that we put out as an open standard. And it got big.
What was it
it's
called?
still out there. RSS.
Oh, yeah. No, I know what RSS is, but I was
we published that standard. Yeah, our little company did it.
But that was the social network itself was RSS too?
Oh, yeah. No, we built the software. So we took the early blogging tech, and then we turned it into a network. We attached RSS to every post and allowed people to subscribe to each other. And then you'd get a feed on our software, which was called
saying,
radio
which one was
time.
it? That was at Blogger or one of those?
Oh, no. No, it was Userland software. So we didn't actually have, we went with the decentralized approach.
I got you.
And we had it on our desktop software, which was our fatal mistake too, is that all the early people in social networking were using our stuff. And the feed you got from your RSS feeds, the blogs you subscribed, looked just like Twitter does today. I mean, exactly. And you could take any post.
That's how I wish it was.
Add to it.
Isn't that how it should be? That Twitter is an app on your computer, not anybody Zuckerberg to tell you what to do, or Elon Musk or anyone else.
No, we're not an open computing system like it was under Microsoft and Windows. This is a closed computing system.
Yeah.
A smartphone is a closed computing system. The big apps are all closed. One of the things that Elon could do to kind of break this up and really make this sing is he could put RSS on every account. And then, you know, people could publish to Twitter, and there could be other networks that develop that off of this, like a platform where RSS serves as a kind of an enabling feature for really blowing this up and making it bigger. Mm-hmm. So it would be pretty wild. That would be a big change and take a lot of the power away from Twitter, but also make it bigger. Putting RSS back into the equation, because we were hoping that it would stay an open kind of decentralized system. And, you know, 4 or 5 years later, you know, Zuckerberg and Jack took our interfaces and turned it into these centralized monstrosities. You know?
Yeah. I mean, there was a time when it was the comment sections on the various websites and blogs were the community. And I had a great community of people on my blog, Stress. And then it was Facebook. Everybody just dropped everything and went to Facebook. And that was the death of it all. You know?
I know our Radio Userland publishing interface was blue, just like Facebook. It looked exactly the same. I mean, the whole we did the whole reverse chronological order. Funny. We added the timestamps on every single post. You know, we added the comments that you could carry along.
So were they just copying you?
essentially, I mean, there wasn't anything innovative in Facebook, from the first couple of years.
Well, I mean, at
I think
first,
the
what it
biggest
was is it looked so much cleaner than MySpace,
that was
which
exactly what
for
that's
whatever
exactly what
reason,
Radio Userland looked like.
yeah, MySpace had it where you had to have this static background with the foreground that moved over it in a way that was just ugly and stupid, and you
Uh,
couldn't change it.
oh no,
So,
no, that was
you
a
know,
page. That was a page creation tool. That wasn't it wasn't a publishing platform. I mean, Facebook looked exactly like Radio Userland. I mean, even the color,
yeah.
that initial blue that they had was exactly like us. And the guy was in college. He wasn't, he was just copying whatever he saw. So it wasn't any innovation. They added the like button. That was a big deal. But that's pretty much it. And then they started their big innovation was on the business side of it as they got bigger, is that they were able to mine and sell this idea of this like social graph.
Well, that's very big of you to not sue him for $1 zillion there.
Yeah, well, I come up with lots of ideas and implement them, and I was early on a lot of stuff, so it doesn't really pay.
I gotcha.
You got to keep on moving forward, and you just do what you do.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, what you're doing is very interesting. I've been reading all your articles here as they come out, and I'll probably finish up this book today or tomorrow. I got some traveling to do. Brave New War. Lots of interesting stuff about Iraq War II. Isn't that funny? I was thinking this as I was reading this morning. That nobody likes talking about Iraq War II at all. It might as well have happened before Korea or something. People just, like they would say the forgotten war about Korea. Who would have thought that Iraq War II could be a forgotten war? And yet now it's just like whole society just wants to avert their eyes from that thing so badly. And just to read you talking about the details of who's blowing up whose mosque at what time and how this was the most important thing in the whole world back then compared to nothing at all now.
Yeah. Yeah, and they also forget Afghanistan. I mean, when they're thinking, there's no way that we'd put $100 billion a year into something like Ukraine, and just like Afghanistan, right? It's like,
yeah,
we can, we will, we do it. And keep that thing alive. I'm pretty sure Russia doesn't want to fall. I mean, they can see that. They don't want to burn themselves out like they did in Afghanistan, but at an accelerated pace.
Mm-hmm. All right, so now back to Ukraine and Russia and all that real quick to wrap up here, I guess, because I know you got to go and I do too. But, it's the comparisons made to the Cuban Missile Crisis and how, at least you had Jack and Bobby Kennedy trying to talk to Khrushchev and figure out something. And here we're not even talking to the Russians. At the same time, we're not stationing nuclear missiles in Ukraine either. But still, we have kind of this height of crisis. And as you're talking about, the swarm just will not allow reasonable takes here. But so I wonder if you think that there's, at some point, can adults intervene here, and someone who's just not even on Twitter and who just doesn't think that way? Like, this sounds crazy and stupid, and Lord forgive me if you exist, but what if you just send Henry Kissinger over there to hammer out a deal? We know that he has a relationship with Putin. He's sworn that, hey guys, we need to wrap this war up in a couple of months here, back a few months ago. And what the hell? He ain't dead yet, and he's not going to start bombing Laos or something. Let's just send him. Or maybe, is that possible? Or this is just, it sounds like a lot of what we're talking about is irrelevant because we're going to all be dead by New Year's or something.
Okay.
By our first anniversary of this war.
That's the danger of the swarm, is it eliminates all off-ramps, right? All reasonable off-ramps. And it says anything other than complete and total victory is off the table. And that no communication, no kind of interaction is allowed. And anyone who tries it at this moment is going to be attacked and discredited and burned, and it's not possible. That's the important for everybody. Everybody listens to this. Everybody who's acting out there, just find a reason to critique this goddamn thing, and attack it. Dissent.
Right.
The more dissent that's out there,
Kissinger.
the more cover.
Yeah, they went after Kissinger. All of a sudden, they remembered all the people who lionize him this whole time and ignore all his war crimes. All of a sudden said, oh, yeah, what about that time you killed all those Cambodians? As soon as he preaches patience and as soon as he says something about restraint, they attack him. Rather than saying, wow, we're being chastised by our great hero, the gray-beard wizard guy we're supposed to listen to.
Oh, 100%. But if there's enough dissent out there pounding on the door, like throwing out, it doesn't really matter whether any one recommendation for how to off ramp this thing is right. And I'm not, it doesn't matter. Just get them out there.
Right. Flood the zone. Flood the zone with demands for peace.
Yeah, flood the zone. And that gives cover to the adults in the room to act. Right?
Right.
I mean, that's one thing about this at the nuclear level. It requires some adults in the room to actually.
So we just need a hot hashtag or something. Is that it?
Well, enough of them. I mean, we're talking, this thing is huge.
Yeah.
And it's tied into a whole set of wars and attitudes and anger that are unrelated to the war. And it's like, all you can do is conduct maneuver warfare. Online maneuver warfare means, attack them from you swarm it from a lot of different directions, or, come at it from a lot of different directions with a lot of different topics, a lot of different avenues attack. And you confuse the psychology of the opponent.
Yeah.
Make it hard for them to counter you.
I'm here trying to quit Twitter so I can get this book written. And I'm so addicted to it. I'm either on the wagon or I'm off. And I was doing pretty good there until YouTube censored my Matt Taibbi interview. So then I had to get back on Twitter to raise hell about that. And now I'm back on the meth again. And I can't quit it. And it's sucking up all of my time. And I can't get my book written. But I also kind of realized, too, I can hear Justin Raimondo complaining in my ear, his ghost, that Twitter is the battlefield. Forget the book, stupid, and just do this. But I really want to write the book, and I'm halfway through it, and I promised everybody I would, and I got a great co-author, and a lot of it's done. I can't quit now, but
write it in chapters, installments, put it on Substack, and put it out every month or two. Another chapter, and that's the way to do a book now. And then you can put it all together at the end, and then you package it for the people who want flip the pages by hand.
Yeah. The problem is all my research is out of order. It's so out of order. So I would have anyway. I hear you though.
No.
That's smart though.
You could go back to previous report or previous chapters and say, "Oh, I've updated this." People will love that.
Yeah.
It's an interactive process now. It's not you can't do these things in isolation and then kind of just. It takes too long. Things change too fast, and you get support along the way while you're doing it, so you can support yourself.
Yeah. I wonder
that's why I went with the report format with the Global Guerrillas. I mean, I could write another book, but man, that I may at some point, but by breaking it into reports, and allows me to focus in on one thing and boil it down to the essentials, so I don't waste people's time. I'm trying to put it like a chapter worth of content into like 5 pages, right? Yeah. All bullet, paragraph, bullet, really easy to read, scan, bam, I get it. Complex idea, done. Yeah. And I do it, this last month I did 3 of those. So
yeah, they're great too.
And then the podcast.
Really great reading.
Oh, thanks.
I wonder if I could get away with doing that with my last book, Enough Already, and just serialize it on Substack and build audience that way. And then maybe me and Daryl. Yeah, me and Daryl are working on Provoked, America's Role in the Russia-Ukraine War now. Daryl Cooper, the great podcaster, Martyr Made. And
oh yeah, you do that, plus you add the audio component for each chapter. Oh, you got a moneymaker right there. I mean, and it's real moneymaker. It's like meaning that people will really like to be part of that, and they get their hit.
Yeah.
It's worth it. I go in and get a chapter. I have the audio version, with Daryl's voice, radio voice going at it, and
hey, bam, mine too.
Done. Oh yeah, no, you're good, but you and I are okay. It's just that something about his voice, man.
No, he's great.
It's awesome.
But I do my own audiobooks, damn it. So we're going to have to trade off chapters or something.
Okay, you can do an A/B test here.
That's right.
You can both read the chapter and then see who gets downloaded.
He's by far the more famous and influential of the two of us, for sure. So
oh no, it's
I'll
just
let him
voice.
read it. And plus, I got to tell you, I hate doing audiobooks. I like having the finished result of it, but I'm such a perfectionist, and it's such a task. It's so much harder than just doing a damn radio show. It's just nuts. So,
yeah, the perfectionism is killer for me because I keep on going. I hate that little pause or that.
Yeah.
Any
word that ends with an S has 2 little clicks after it, and I have to go and cut out every single one of those little things. They're all good nuts. So.
Yeah, that's nuts. But you don't have to do it with somebody else's stuff. Just
that's true. Yeah, exactly right. Just encourage him to drink lots of water.
Okay, dude, so now you got to plan forward, man.
I think so.
Serialize.
I think that's it. And we already got our title. And look, I mean, the book's already written from beginning to end. It's a speech that I originally wrote in 2020 called "The New Cold War with Russia is All America's Fault," that I gave the day they locked down Seattle. I was there giving a speech, Leap Day 2020. And then when the war broke out at the beginning of this year, I just added to it and gave the same speech again. And then, so it's already written all the way through. It's just what we're trying to do now is add a million billion things to it and make it better. And maybe I got too far off on the track of turning this thing into fool's errand again when it needs to be, as you say,
you also
much briefer and not waste people's time and just really get to it. But I got,
the serial
so much
chapter approach
research
is also
that I found that I wanted to put in there. You know, it's just,
it's easier if you do it in this way too, because I found that trying to put an entire book into my head hurts.
Yeah.
Because I have to have all the chapter structure and everything all at once to get it down. It hurts. It's just easier just to do it on the chapter by chapter, by month, and then you're participating in the network politics of dissent on this stuff right now.
Yeah,
and that's where it matters. And giving people like deeper content to draw from when they're out in the world, trying to beat this thing back.
Yeah,
it's important to do it in that way because it's not only increases your impact and makes it easier for you, and you make some more money doing it that way than trying to sell the finished product. There's no other way to really do it now.
All right, so let me ask you this then. We're going to run my buddy Dave for president as the Libertarian Party candidate, and he's going to be great. But we're up against the Frankenstein gangster computer gods, as you describe them, and the network swarm. What's the secret sauce? We can use this swarm against them and turn the thing into a giant win for the unified field theory of human freedom here.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold. I mean, U.S. has hollowed out to a large extent, so that's why it's like so reliant on this network. Winning there is really the key. I would suggest more like what Balaji is working on, but I mean, I battled on and went through a lot of the topics that he's currently trying to push forward.
Who's that?
A decade ago. Balaji, the tech guy who just wrote a book on networked state.
Okay.
I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
Anyway.
You have never heard of him?
Nah.
Okay, yeah, he's got a pretty huge following in the tech, the tech libertarian space.
Okay.
Like the crypto, he was really good in crypto early on.
But
he's basically about creating network states, like alternatives, like and trying to create the simulate kind of opt-in society.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough, but things that go beyond the state, that kind of draw members and participants from a variety of different locations, and people can opt in and get a lot of the kind of protections and capabilities you normally get from the state, but through a networked entity. So it's like kind of competes with the state.
Right.
As we know it, the geographical thing that we're dealing with right now. But, trying to compete for ownership or control of this thing that's already in decline, it's hollowing out. So many of the features of the nation state that we used to expect during the Cold War and stuff are gone.
Yeah.
I mean, control over borders, control over narrative, control over everything. It's gone.
Right. But
all it is this hollow shell.
So, I mean, but that's the thing is like, it sounds to me like what you're saying is we have a huge opportunity here. I mean, we're not going to lock up the Electoral College and make my man president. But the left-wing and right-wing leadership, such as they are so intellectually hollow. And compared to our narrative, I don't think they can hold up. It's just a question of, the way this would have been put in the past is like, let us in the debates. But that's not the point. But the point is, how do we, use our global guerrilla type tactics to essentially dominate the discussion, no matter what Kamala Harris and her handlers think the campaign is supposed to be about. We want to force them to talk about central banking and war, inflation and the boom bust cycle and imperialism and the police state and all the corruption on Wall Street and in big pharma and all the things that we really hate about what our government is doing to this country. And so that's the win, is if we can make it where our discussion is if not the dominant discussion, at least a major part of the discussion in 2024, because they just can't avoid it. Because everywhere they go, people say, yeah, but that Smith guy keeps saying X, Y, and Z. So what about that? And it's just part of it because they can't escape it, because we've somehow mastered this swarm for ourselves and can use it against them, right? That's the real challenge that we have here.
Yeah, a couple 100,000 people online acting as a squeaky wheel, always asking the same questions, relative to the same pattern, can have an effect. They can sway things. And if they have a few, maybe one issue that they really think is the most important, and they're constantly pushing on that, there's a good chance that that thing will be implemented. Try to make it as narrow and as focused and as widely held within your group, that this is the thing
Right.
that we want to get done. And man, you do that online, and you show up at you're in all their tweet streams, and you're in all their responding to every single one of their articles, both in the comment section as well as online in the big networks. Man, it will rise. It will get attention.
Great.
Because they see you as a potential audience that's favorable to them. And if they can win you over, it's goodness for them.
Yeah. Hey, that's a great place to leave it, on some good advice for the future here, if we live to see it. So thanks very much for that, John.
Yeah. Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
That is John Robb, and Global Guerrillas is his Substack, and his book about Iraq War II and so forth is called Brave New War. Really good stuff.
The Scott Horton Show, Anti-War Radio, can be heard on KPFK 90.7 FM in LA, APSradio.com, antiwar.com, scotthorton.org, and libertarianinstitute.org.